my kingdom, you must choose fire. I won't stop.
I see I was muted. I want to say hello to all the longtime Open House New Yorkers and a very warm welcome to folks who are joining us for the first time and to everyone joining us beyond the 5 boroughs. What you're hearing there was our 5 borough playlist, which we like to start off any Open House New York event with. My name is Pamela Puhalski. This is my first week as executive director of Open House New York, which is such a privilege to join this beloved and important civic organization. If you don't know, for nearly 2 decades, Open House New York has been offering unparalleled access to the city through its public programs and our signature weekend festival, which this year is happening on October 16th and 17th. So mark your calendars. And tonight's talk kicks off Radical Knowledge, Libraries as Community Catalysts. It's the latest installment of our ongoing urban infrastructure series, which basically offers robust public programming to demystify New York City's complexity, no small task there, and inform public conversations and decisions about the city's future. The overall series Radical Knowledge examines how libraries serve as both vibrant learning institution and centers for their communities, providing both the physical and, as we're all learning, the really important virtual spaces that enrich civic life. Can you believe that over 900 participants have signed up for tonight's talk? And I say tonight because it's approaching the evening hours in Brooklyn, but I do know many of you are signing in from different time zones. So welcome to whatever hour it is for you. But I believe that the popularity of this event is not just due to our distinguished speakers, but just shows how much we all value libraries as part of our urban civic fabric and kind of our commitment to learn and do more. I will say that as part of the series of Radical Knowledge, we're going to announce some future events, so please stay tuned. Our approach for this program tonight and overall for the series is to really co-create activities and educational along a range of topics with our community organizations and our program partners. So I want to give a shout out to them because we couldn't have pulled off these events without them. The New York Public Library, the Queens Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and Metropolitan New York Library Council. I also want to thank our funders, the National Endowments of the Arts, the New York State Council on Arts, and the Department of Cultural Affairs in New York City, and our board, especially the board of directors of Open House New York, especially Dorothy Dunn and Margaret Sullivan, who have played a leading role in putting the program together. We'll just conclude by saying your membership support makes our work possible. And we are going to give you a plug towards the end of the chat. You'll look for the plug for how you can join a member. Membership starts at $50 and it's fully tax deductible. You may wonder what's a benefit of membership when we do have free events. Not all of our events are free, but you become a part of our community and our family, which is what we welcome. A little bit of housekeeping. Tonight's event will be recorded. So the video is off, you're muted until the Q&A, and then you'll be able to pop questions into the chat. So tonight, our speakers for Social Infrastructure is a Right, Places for Gathering, Sharing, and Learning. We have the Librarian of Congress, huge, wonderful woman, Dr. Carla Hayden. She's the 14th Librarian of Congress. She's both the first woman and the first African-American to lead the National Library. She was nominated by President Barack Obama in 2016, and she's got a very distinguished career. I know there are a number of librarians in New York and across the country with us. I just want to say that she got her start as a library associate and a children's librarian, and then as a young adult services coordinator. So for those of you who are looking for some career inspiration, we got it. She'll be in a talk with sociologist Eric Klinenberg, who's the Ellen Gould Shepard Professor, Eric, of Social Science at NYU, and he's also the director of the Institute for Public Knowledge, which is based at New York University. a prolific writer. Some of you may know his Bible, Palaces for the People, How Social Infrastructure Can Help Fight Inequality, Polarization, and the Decline of Civic Life, which was published in 2018. And Eric is just, his scholarly work is everywhere. He's quoted in the press often, most recently this morning with the New York Times article on the important work mutual aid groups are doing to serve their fellow New Yorkers. And lastly, but definitely not least important, we have anthropologist Dr. Shannon Mattern, who is our series moderator. So you'll be hearing from her throughout this series over the year. She's also our thought partner, and she's a professor of anthropology at the New School for Social Research. Her writing and teaching focuses on archives, libraries, and other media spaces. She's the author of The New Downtown Library, and she's got a regular column in Places magazine. So handing off to you, Shannon, and thank you to our guests, our participants, and definitely our speakers.
Great. Thank you very much, Pamela. Thanks so much to Eric and Carla for being here this evening, and thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm going to offer just a few kind of introductory contextualizing comments and then turn it over to Drs. Klinenberg and Hayden. So just one moment, need to share a screen. All right. So here we are, Radical Knowledge. Welcome, everybody. There has been no shortage of Future of the Library panels, symposia, and workshops. They're sufficiently frequent to have burst among librarians their own brand of inside jokes and bingo cards. There are a few factors we hope will make Open House New York's Radical Knowledge discussion series different. First, it's part of a year-long series of events, panels, podcasts, treasure hunts, and virtual and physical tours that feature the diversity of knowledge institutions distributed all across the city, and they recognize the expertise and local knowledge embedded in those institutions. Second, by partnering with and featuring the work of not only the city's world-renowned institutions, but also its neighborhood branches and small independent collections, Open House New York seeks to recognize the breadth of what constitutes a library and to allow those various sites to tell their own stories in their own spaces, to quote the Open House New York, to create the conditions for underrepresented communities in New York to shape the future of libraries, end quote. Such ideals are, of course, in keeping with Open House New York's commitment to openness, but that term, in this particular temporal context, contains layered resonances. As the city, the country, and much of the world continue to feel the loss of the pandemic, which has thrown into high relief the racial and socioeconomic disparities in our midst, and as we enter with cautious optimism into a new political era, we look forward to reopening our city and its institutions and public spaces, as well as our civic and social lives. This period of post-pandemic planning is a perfect time to think about the place and potential of the library in a reopened city. As we'll see today, the library sits at the convergence of several of the past year's compounding crises. In addition to the pandemic and our reckoning with a long history of structural racism, we're also confronted with the realization that we're in the midst of an epistemological crisis. And those fractured cultures of belief and truth reveal widening social rifts. Libraries are positioned where all of these vectors converge, reminding us that our crises are intertwined and that any strategies of redress should be holistic and intersectional. Future programs in this series and related OHNY programming will address such topics as the library's role in building inclusive communities, how it provides connectivity and promotes public learning, and the various digital and infrastructural literacies necessary for an informed public. Also, how libraries can fruitfully partner with other institutions and cultural agents, and perhaps even commercial ventures, and how the library can aid in economic and workforce development and in building strong urban communities. We're starting off this series today by talking about the library as a social infrastructure. Basic community needs are often drawn into relief precisely when they're not met and when infrastructures fail. By mid-March of 2000, most American libraries had shut their doors. This happens to be the library near my apartment in Peter Cooper Village. Some cities still circulated physical materials, either via contactless pickup or by bookmobile. And while their reading lounges and cafes and media labs sat empty for a few months, and some are still closed to the public, librarians rushed to move as many of their services and programs online as possible. From children's story hours and author talks to ESL classes and reference services. Librarians compiled lists of public health resources for their communities And amidst the summer movement for Black Lives uprisings, they gathered materials about the history of white supremacy and strategies for promoting anti-racism. Facing a concurrent unemployment crisis, libraries also enhanced their online career resources and job search services. Meanwhile, some librarians called out their senior patrons at home to check in, while their buildings became distribution centers for meals or childcare services or childcare centers for frontline workers. As Harvard librarian John Overholt proclaimed on Twitter, there's nothing at all contradictory about believing that libraries are essential to a healthy democratic society and believing that physical access to library collections is not essential in the midst of a deadly pandemic. This isn't the first time we've celebrated the library's versatility and dependability. Libraries took on the role of community refuge, switchboard, and dispatch center during the 2011 earthquake in Japan, and again during Hurricane Sandy, which Eric has written a lot about, in New York in 2012. Even in non-crisis situations, people turn to libraries to access the internet, to take a GED class, to get help with a resume or job search, seek referrals to other community resources, and to escape the summer heat or winter cold. As the Center for an Urban Future found in their multi-year study of New York City's branch libraries, public libraries are often seen as opportunity institutions, opening doors to and for the disenfranchised. In their influential 2013 report, which you see here, Cuff illustrated or highlighted the benefits to immigrants, seniors, individuals searching for work, public school students, and aspiring entrepreneurs. They wrote, "No other institution, public or private, does a better job of reaching people who have been left behind in today's economy, have failed to reach their potential in the city's public school system, who simply need help navigating an increasingly complex world. And few institutions are asked to take on such a wide and expanding list of demands without a proportionate increase in budget." As librarian historian Wayne Wigand addresses in his book, Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library, public libraries have been home to various social services for immigrants, seniors, shut-ins, hospitals, nursing homes, schools, the disabled, and so forth, for more than a century. Practicing librarians know this very well. Public health, urban planning, and community organizing researchers and practitioners have also long recognized the library's social role in the civic sphere. Some libraries have physically co-located with other city services. The Chicago Housing Authority and Chicago Public Library, for instance, have collaboratively built 3 facilities that combine the 2 services, which you can see here in the middle. In the late 1960s, development economists began using the term social infrastructure to distinguish services and resources like education, research, physical health, and psychic well-being from such physical infrastructures as transport, communications, and utilities. Some of my own earlier work examines how libraries' social infrastructural services are scaffolded by their technical and architectural systems, and how those social roles can sometimes serve as smokescreens in urban development plans. Dr. Klinenberg's wide-reaching and widely celebrated 2018 book, Palaces for the People, elaborates on the vital roles our libraries play as social infrastructures. And Dr. Hayden has sustained these infrastructures through her years of service and leadership in Chicago, Baltimore, and now the Library of Congress. So we want to extend the conversation here today amidst this moment of opening. So last week I posed the following questions to today's guests, and maybe they'll take some of them up in their following conversation. So how do the library's social infrastructural functions supplement its traditional information-based services? And how does or how should the library share its social infrastructural responsibilities with other civic institutions and even private corporations? Next, how have the compounding crises of 2020 and 21, hopefully it won't stretch beyond 21, stretched or diminished or transformed the library's role as a social infrastructure? And which of those transformations are likely to stick with us well beyond the passing of the crisis? And finally, given Open House New York's focus on the material physical city, what roles do physical and virtual spaces play together in helping the library serve its social infrastructural roles? And I will end there, stop sharing, and turn it over to Drs. Klinenberg and Hayden.
I'm so pleased to be with you, and I am positioning my autographed copy of Eric's book that, as you might see, has many tabs in different colors, because he was able to present the idea of libraries as part of that social infrastructure in a way that reached people who would never think about libraries in that way. And so thank you for that, Eric, and Shannon, also for your introduction, because many people that are probably tuning in are thinking, libraries, what? I thought it was just a place to get the latest Harry Potter, or just a place if I needed to possibly do something else. But the idea of libraries as opportunities, and part of that has been somewhat contentious at times when budgets are cut in libraries, and I want my trash picked up and I want my things too as a citizen. But when you think about cutting off funding to these structures and these places called libraries, you are cutting off opportunity. So Eric, how did you fold in libraries? Because we've talked about it, but what was the moment for you when you were looking at all of these places in communities?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. By the way, thank you, Dr. Hayden, for putting that book up again. It really means a lot to me when you did that. And I love seeing that photograph of the two of us. Do you remember that? It was
yes.
It just struck me that you weren't wearing a mask, however, and I feel like that was very heartless of you to not wear a mask, even though it was 2019. You're the Librarian of Congress. You should know that these things are coming.
Oh, I have them. My favorite is the one with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg that says, "Never underestimate a girl with a book."
Oh, that's great.
So try to wear that one.
And before I answer your question, also, I do want to say thank you to Shannon Mattern for that great introduction and nice orientation to this discussion today, and also to our series. Shannon, for those of you who are not library people, is really the preeminent contemporary scholar of the library and its material form. The way in which it's evolving as a physical and social space, and I really encourage you to read her column in places and to read her work. She's just an extraordinary thinker, and I've learned a lot from Shannon. Shannon's one of the many people in library world I've gotten to know after I wrote my book, and it's been one of the great things for me. So I hope that Shannon can share some of her work with us. So to Dr. Hayden, to your question about discovering the library, it turns out that I was not one of those kids who was raised in a public library building. I know I've met a lot of librarians who spend time with these children who basically spend their afternoons in the library, some even more than the afternoon. And I did not grow up in one. I had kids in New York City. I live in Manhattan, not too far from NYU and the New School. And I discovered the library as a resource for parents, as so many people do, when I just needed a place to get away from my apartment and get the kids out of our tiny little life. And the library offered this kind of spaciousness and this generosity, plus all of these books and people who knew about them. And that was extraordinary. But the real way that I kind of came to embrace the library is that, after the 2016 election, around the time of going into the 2016 election, and in that election, I don't know how you felt, Dr. Hayden, but that was a pretty dark time for me. And I started to worry about things like democracy in America and an open society and the fate of immigrants and people who had real needs. And I found that every time I walked into a branch library in New York City, my heart got a little bit warmer, and I felt some reason to believe that the ideal of America that I admire so much is shared by others and is still alive. And so over time, I came to see the library as something much more than a place to read books, and that's something a lot of people already knew about. And I was late to that story, but and the more time I spent in libraries, the more I realized they stand for and represent the best of who we are. Not always, and
Well,
Shannon
let's
and
make sure we bring that up, Eric.
yeah, some
Let's-
of the people that Shannon just cited in her presentation have shown us all the ways in which libraries, like so many other institutions, have failed.
Yes.
And have sinned in the ways that America has sinned, by discriminating by race and by being exclusive. There's no perfect institution, but still, at the end of the day, it seems to me like we need to have some symbols that represent the best of us, and we need to have some ideals that we aspire to. And I don't think the library is a perfect institution, but boy, it's high up there.
Well, Eric, when you mentioned that it's not a perfect institution, and in some of Shannon's work, she brings this out. And yes, it was designed to be, as other institutions in this country might have been. However, in the South in particular, and Representative John Lewis talks about going to his library in Georgia when he was about 15, being denied a library card. There is so much literature about libraries in the South. And that in one of my most recent inspirational trips throughout this country in the last few years was to Jackson, Mississippi. And they were dedicating the statue outside to the Jackson Nine. These were students from a historically Black college in the late 50s who integrated or tried to integrate the public library there by using library skills. And what they used the card catalog, they made sure that when they went to that library to ask for materials, they had checked the card catalogs in their school libraries and things to make sure that the books weren't there, because that was a way that they could deny sometimes. Well, these books aren't there. You have to go to the colored branch. And even in Baltimore, Maryland, there was the branch, the Pritchard Street branch. So that idea of libraries being part of what was happening in the culture, but also still that symbol that they were important, and that library card was important, and what was inside was important, was still there.
It's right. And so I think one of the challenges in our time is how to remember and focus on the ways in which institutions we demand a lot from have fallen short of their ideals, and to make sure that we establish that critical edge so that we know that we can do better, but still to recognize that the ideal that they stand for is something extraordinary, and to appreciate, and this is the hardest piece, I think, to appreciate some of the progress that we have made. Right. And I will say, to spend time in the New York City public library system, go to Queens, for instance, go to Brooklyn. I mean, it is to see the kind of America that I think many of us would like us to achieve. The central branch of the Queens Public Library with books in every language you can imagine, and a social world of people sharing rooms and sharing tables, having conversations across all of the conventional lines, programming that's meant to bridge, not just to bond, right? To genuinely do that. That is hard work, and it is happening in libraries. And I guess that, because I wrote this book about the power of social infrastructure and gathering places, and have been making the case for several years that we really need to reinvest in them and redesign them and rebuild them, it can sound a little bit glib, as if I think, oh, if only we built better libraries, we'd solve the problem of polarization and racial.
Wouldn't hurt.
Well, that's right. I mean, I don't think that. I don't think it would solve it. But if you're going to try that project, what's a better place to begin than the library?
That's right. And I responded to Queens, and I see that on the chat that my colleague from University of Pittsburgh, who's now big time, Howard Besser, just mentioned something. I responded to Queens because the world of seeing myself in books opened up for me in Jamaica, Queens, when I was going to PS 96, and the little branch library right across the street. Someone gave me in I was like 1960. This book, Bright April, and it was the first time I ever saw myself in a book.
Wow.
And the idea that you can have things in libraries that could open up the world to you, but also to actually show you yourself in a respectful way is important. And so I responded, Eric, when you said, well, it's not, don't think it's glib to say that libraries would help. There's a new report, and I've got it here, librarian that I am, the New America Report, Public Libraries in the Pandemic, Digital Shifts and Disparities to Overcome. 15% of the people who responded to this survey recently said that their internet access was cut off totally when the libraries closed because of the pandemic. And I have talked to so many of my colleagues around the country about what that meant. It was heartbreaking for so many librarians. And I knew it, to have to close when people are in need the most. That's when public libraries have been going into it. You think of Ferguson in terms of social equity. Scott Bonner, the librarian there, was there he had been 3 weeks on the job when Ferguson happened.
Amazing. But
he turned it into the place where the teachers could give classes. You know the story. It's something. And recently, the library that I've had the honor of being associated with here in Baltimore, Pratt Library, just got a grant, and they put on the top of a branch and got funding for it, a tower, so that they could give internet access to the families in the immediate surrounding.
Well,
so
I'm so glad you're bringing up those examples. And since we're talking with the Open House New York crowd tonight, I know that not everybody in New York City goes to the library, although, millions of people do. Right. And I want to invite everyone, at a time when it might be harder to go into a stranger's home, when the libraries are really open and accessible fully, and some are, please don't miss walking into your library to see the life that's happening there, because it's not all a happy story. What you'll see in the library is who we are and what we value. It's the reality principle on steroids. And I'm a sociologist, by craft, and I kind of want everyone to do Sociology 101 by looking at what these institutions do and how they operate on a daily basis. You made this point about the internet, and it's such an important issue, because one of the things that illustrates, Dr. Hayden, is the way that libraries are now filling a role that they might not have been intended to fulfill originally, and that we might even not realize they do, but they're essential. So in the United States, you need internet access to be a citizen. You need internet access to do a job search. In the past year, you've needed an internet access to go to work, to go to school, to shop for all kinds of things, maybe to register to vote, maybe to do the census, right? I mean, it's as
to get a vaccine thing. Think of all the seniors there that don't have young people to help them get on those websites and do that, and where are they going to get it and get it? Yes.
Thank you. And I hadn't even thought of it. It's stupid.
Oh, yes.
I had not thought about these last few months or weeks. The way to get a shot to get your vaccine is on the internet. Boy, if you
when people talk about e-government, think about that. E-government, all of the things you need, like you're talking about, all of the things. I remember one of the stark examples for me that happened in a city was when there was a period that Section 8 housing renewal was coming up, and it was going to be just 10 weeks all online. And I was sitting in a cabinet meeting, right, with the housing department, all of these things as the librarian on the back end, because the library was not there, police, fire, they're at the big table, where I'm with the social service, we're that. And and I kind of meekly, where are people going to get online to do it? And it was like an oxymoron. Section 8, 10 weeks, and computer access. So they were like, oh, right. And then the librarians got into gear, and sure enough, 10 o'clock the morning that, the thing, they had already loaded up the applications. They were ready. They had looked through the application, ready to help the people they knew were going to be there to go to, so they could do and renew for Section 8 housing.
It's an extraordinary thing. And, actually it points to one of the questions that Dr. Mattern raised for us, which is about the way the library relates to other institutions and agencies. And I'll tell you, for the most part, I would say that publishing this book the last couple of years created this love fest between me and Library Land, which I didn't really know very well.
They love you.
It's very nice, but with a big exception, and that is that in the book, I kind of celebrate the ways in which librarians work as, true public servants, eager to play many roles, everything from taking care of the 4-year-olds who are left there in the morning in the summer when they're go to work, to dealing with, older people who live alone, to helping people with the job search, to dealing with homelessness and mental illness. And there are definitely people in Library Land who very fairly said, Eric, it's true that we do all that. And it's not like we're complaining every day about it. We do see it as part of our job, but the truth is it's more than we should have to handle. And we should be careful about what library labor involves. We live in a society where the truth is, and I do write about this in the book, we have neglected to fund so many.
Not mine or some of the others.
And institutions. Okay. We've neglected so much service work that should be happening by other agencies. It falls into the library, right? The library are places where homeless people spend a lot of time because we haven't tackled homelessness. They're places where older people who live alone go for companionship, or younger people who should be in after-school programs go, because we don't do things in those areas. And the internet is another thing. We need to have a national plan to make internet service a utility and everyone a public right. And until that, the library, all the pressure is hit.
And the American Library Association is advocating for that some of the emergency connectivity funds and all the broadband access, that libraries are included in that. They're doing that right now because they are the vehicle for so many people. And so when you think about your book and why that meant so much and why Shannon's work means so much, when you have people who aren't in library world or aren't librarians advocating for it and showing other people these types of things, it helps. You need more people in any kind of move for movement. You need people from all sectors to join in and be part of it. So that's why we really appreciate this and bringing this up.
Well, thank you for that. I want to ask you something, because obviously most of us are here because we appreciate you and your.
Oh no, this is.
People are going to get really sick of us of this. We should start making fun of each other because they're going to get sick of us.
We will, and your daughter, like she did before, is going to look at both of us like, "What are these? Who are these people?" And your wife is so generous and stuff. She's,
We're not helping the cause here. We're just getting deep into our love fest again. But
sorry, guys.
Okay, but I'm not. This is not love, but it's a real question. My sense from conversations I've had with people in federal government during the pandemic and people in local governments, as we get into this moment where we're starting to see all these cities across the country that are dealing with a real financial crunch, right? I mean, we just don't have money to do all kinds of ordinary things like staff schools and public transit, and who knows what's going to happen with the bailout. That you get the sense that cities and states are going to be more cash strapped than they've been in some time, absent some federal thing. So what I wanted to ask you is, in the world of kind of library politics that you can see from your seat in DC, are there things we should know about that are happening? Are there?
A lot of it is local too. You have the American Library Association doing it. What is sometimes frustrating, and my mom was in social work and social services and worked in Chicago, in fact, and the thing that is difficult and we need to work on is to make sure that we're not creating these silos like the school systems, and they need places where some kids could go for their virtual learning, and you have libraries that have meeting rooms or places. So some of the funding and the things that could happen in libraries. More interconnectivity of these. You're serving the same people, and that's the frustration. The kids that are in school are the same ones that, yes, are after school at a public library. They're the same ones that are sometimes in the juvenile justice system. They're the same ones. There's a lot of connectivity, and that's that wraparound service thing. And so to have libraries in it. So sorry, that's my soapbox about wrapping it in. And the more you have people saying on a national level too, that put libraries are places and should be thought of the relief and the help for communities. And don't forget rural areas. I know this is New York, but rural areas definitely have some challenges as well. But that
there's a woman named Julie Sandorf.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned Julie.
From the Repson Foundation, which has been a big supporter of libraries, especially around New York. And, she talks to me a lot about the period in the 1970s when New York City was really dealing with a kind of crisis in fiscal austerity, when libraries were open just a few days a week.
Yes.
And sometimes, closing early. We already have a situation where, libraries are, open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., sometimes 8 p.m., not open on the weekends in many places.
Yes.
The access to the library is quite restricted, right? And so one of the things I push for is this fantasy idea of calling places like libraries social infrastructure in the political realm, to see if when we talk about making investments in infrastructure, to make America work better, if institutions like libraries could be part of that campaign, right?
Yes.
Just as there's an infrastructure for water and for energy and for communications, there's an infrastructure for social life. And the way that I mean it, which is a little different than the literature that Shannon has been citing, is when I talk about social infrastructure, I'm really referring to these physical places that shape the way we interact. And I think an emphasis on those physical places as infrastructure is politically useful. And I would really love us to be able to push that debate. I don't know if it works in an infrastructure bill, but it seems to me like if we try let's do it. If we try to rebuild without that focus, I just don't know where the resources go, because when I talk to my friends in city government, when I talk to the mayoral candidates in New York City, the library, they see all the things that happen in library, but it's like they don't know how to fit it into their priority system. They got schools, they got crime, they got the other stuff. Where's the library?
They've got fire departments. They have trash pickup. I've been in those cabinet meetings, as I said, and it's in different cities and in different things. And yes, as a citizen, you want all of those things. So having the advocates, having people that will say, can we put libraries into the mix, and they are part of the mix. The hardest connection sometimes is the school system connection, and school libraries are hurting, and they have the thing. So it's going to take some work, but having these kinds of discussions, thinking about it, is one way to put it. You have to be at the table.
Yeah.
What's that famous thing, or you'll be on the menu, So.
I'm reminded of a thing we talked about. I know that Shannon's going to bring in some questions in a minute, but I believe when we spoke at the American Library Association, I brought up for the group of librarians who were assembled there that day, the story about that economist who wrote the article in Forbes magazine saying that libraries should be knocked down because we don't have the good cost benefit analysis that shows what they offer. And he said, you remember this? He said, until you get that, we should close all the libraries, sell them off, and replace them with Amazon stores. And the pandemic, as libraries, we're doing all these things that Shannon put up on the screen, providing internet access, like blasting it out, doing classes digitally for people who had access, right?
Ebooks.
Vastly expanding the ebooks collection. And what Amazon was doing during that time was going from, the owner who had $100 billion to an owner who had $200 billion. You think, imagine living through the pandemic without the library, and with Amazon, and with all of us relying on Amazon even more. And for me, it just kind of emphasizes the value of library, the enduring library, the transforming nature of libraries, and how remiss we would be if we didn't come out of this with a deeper appreciation for what they are capable of doing.
One of my other heroes, Vartan Gregorian, Carnegie. I have a copy of a speech he made, and I asked for it at the opening of a library in Kansas City, Missouri. And the title of the speech was Libraries as Acts of Civic Renewal. And I said, oh, I got to have a copy. I heard about it. I said, I got to have a copy of it, because that idea of that. And I just want to, I hope as we open up though, and I've said this in other settings, Alberto Manguel in his book, The History of Reading, has that chapter on forbidden reading. And the frontispiece of the thing has a lady who looks like she was a slave in front of a cabin with a book. And there's that one passage where he says, the centuries of dictators, tyrants, slave owners, and other illicit holders of power have known an illiterate crowd is the easiest to rule. And if you cannot prevent people from learning to read, the next best recourse is to limit its scope. Just a thought.
Okay, so I'll throw in a few questions here. I'm going to try to blend together a few separate questions that folks have asked. One is, I know, Eric, you mentioned that you're thinking about social infrastructures in terms of particularly physical space, but given how much we've learned over the past year and how nimble, maybe kind of putting in overtime, putting in tremendous effort of translating what were once place-based physical services into the digital realm. I'm wondering if you could say a bit more about how the social infrastructure role has shifted. Somebody also asked about ebooks. Obviously electronic books, lending, right, use of electronic resources has gone up dramatically. Some of the librarians I've spoken to said that the pendulum is probably not going to swing all the way back towards the material and the physical after the pandemic. So because we've learned a lot about people's preferences, people have developed new habits over the pandemic. So how has this decreased access to physical place transformed these social infrastructure roles for the long term?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to say something that you might find contentious, but I still think at the end of this experience that as much as we appreciate, that we can all be here together on Zoom, and I checked into the chat, a little while ago, and it's extraordinary to see all the people who are in this conversation from all over the world. That's a great
DC Public, the head of DC Public just left. Yep.
It's fantastic. I saw people from a lot of different countries. I've been teaching my classes on Zoom. I've been talking to my mother on FaceTime. There are all kinds of things that make me appreciate technology. That said, I still think of kind of the digital realm as communications infrastructure, and I think of social infrastructure as the stuff that gets us into the face-to-face world. And I would ask you, imagine if right now I came to you and said, I've just gotten notice that we're going to be in this pandemic for another 5 years, and we're basically going to be working from home and interacting with each other in this way, and we won't really be able to be back into the physical world with each other for another 5 years. I think that would be the worst kind of news we could imagine. We would be despondent, and the reason we'd be despondent is because we miss the physicality of social life, the intimacy of social life. And what we're doing here kind of has features of social life, but is not as fleshed out. And so for me, all of this is better than not having this. And there are all kinds of things that we can do here that we could never do in a world that was just face-to-face. But I think I place a premium in the work that I do on the kind of social life that gets consummated in the flesh.
And some people want to be in libraries like they do in coffee shops and things, just to be around other people, not necessarily to interact, but just to have that feeling of I'm here, other people are here, I'm doing my thing. And that's another part of the physicality of space, and being able to just go into a space just to not be in a static place or to get away from other things. You also have another aspect of the technology and what libraries can do. And the Library of Congress has just been involved with the Andrew Mellon Foundation. It's right there in New York with Elizabeth Alexander. A lot of the stuff that they're doing, collecting, having people create their own stories and history and collections, and that's another way that we can involve people. It's not like what you have from the library is static or you're receiving all the time. What about if we engage communities even more with the creation of things and add to it? So I had to put that plug in there too. So I see Howard on there and different ones. I love the chats. So Shannon, what are some of the thoughts, and Eric, that are coming up about the libraries in the city?
In terms of their roles or the physical?
No, the physical spaces, because that can be a challenge.
Well, that actually unites a couple questions that were posed here. And it's been part of a lot of the discussions that I've overheard and participated in. I know Eric has spoken about it as well, the increased use of outdoor space. When I went around the country in 2003 to look at a bunch of cities that had designed new libraries, everybody was trying to find ways to put in outdoor space, but security, both of people's bodies and of library materials, was often a concern. Seems to be that's less of a concern now, because we realize that prioritizing gathering is more important sometimes than the security of the collection. So that's one thing. Eric, I'm wondering what else you think about given Open House New York's focus specifically on architecture and urbanism. Yeah, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, clearly this issue about unfolding the library and trying to do more things outdoors has an urgency to it. And, it's interesting. I was kind of pushing IMLS and other leaders in library world to think much more aggressively about this in the spring and summer. I don't think we did enough. And it seems to me like we need real leadership kind of in the world of design and policy to think about how libraries can use the area around them to operate in the community. And in New York City, this is a more challenging thing. There's some urban library systems where the libraries don't have parking lots or parks near them. It's tough to do this. But there are a lot of places where the libraries are embedded in broader ecosystems, and you can materially shift the way that the library operates and do things outdoors. I so hope that that's not going to be as relevant in the spring and the summer as it will be moving forward. But let's face it, the kids, for instance, are not going to get vaccinated until the fall at the earliest. And I would like to see children be able to use the library in the ways that they historically have been able to.
Well, Eric and Shannon, I mentioned that the director of the DC Public Library just got off, but they have a branch there that has a combination of the rec center in the community, and they have a rooftop reading space, cool space. So a lot of libraries, they have these flat roofs, and they have that. You could have different things on that, and there, of course, the community gardens and things like that. But the rooftop aspect of an outdoor space. So it's not going to be just because of and Philly, I think they have one too. Their central library has utilized their rooftop spaces. So this is going to be even beyond the pandemic.
I think that's really also beyond the pandemic. When we get to the point where we're thinking post-pandemic, and boy, I hope we get there very, very soon. We're going to be confronting a whole bunch of other questions and challenges, right? So another thing on the material side of libraries is, what's the role of libraries in a global climate emergency? And I have argued for a long time that libraries really could operate as they do operate as resilient centers, but we need to make an investment. Here's back to infrastructure. We need to make an investment in the basic systems that libraries operate on. Every library, in my view, should have a backup power generator so that if there's an outage, people in every community know that the library will be open and available to them. I'd like to see them develop better wireless mesh networks so that there's a backup to the internet if the main internet systems go down. And there's some libraries that have done extraordinary work creating those kinds of systems, but I think libraries could do that. Ideally, I'd like to see us investing. We clearly need to make sure that all libraries are physically accessible to everyone, and there remain too many libraries that are not physically accessible to people with disabilities because they just haven't updated the equipment.
They're old.
And we should recognize, Dr. Hayden and Shannon, I know that you've also spent time traveling around the world and seeing some of the exciting libraries that have come up in other countries. You see when you go to Europe or Canada, libraries built by governments that want the library to be a symbol of their version of democracy and society. And one thing that they often do is they invest a lot of money and thought into, how do you design common areas, including bathrooms, so that you don't have that as a pressure point in every library where the librarians are monitoring libraries for 4 hours a day. Monitoring bathrooms, having shared spaces that are large, that are generous, having showers, having, creating an infrastructure that recognizes the reality of what libraries are doing right now. And actually, if you do that, if you modernize those systems, then not only are they going to work better on a daily basis for people who are in them, but if there's another Sandy or Maria or Harvey or whatever the next big climate event is, a heat wave, the library then becomes a natural place for people to go and rebuild and recover. And we need to be thinking about the next wave of issues.
And that libraries should be part of it.
Well, speaking of part of it, I hope this isn't too big of a question to ask in our last 2 minutes here, but it kind of, again, unites some of our audience members' concerns, and that is the larger ecology of social infrastructure. I know you mentioned in speaking about the library's role in this regard that some folks have said that, yes, it's wonderful, we deserve celebration for doing all of these things, but in an ideal world, we would not be asked to take on all of these responsibilities. If we did have a robust ecology where we had appropriate mental health services, childcare services, et cetera, what would the ideal situation be? What would the ideal kind of portfolio and program be for a library? Maybe we like it the way it is, but what would kind of some aspirational, this is kind of going on with some folks' questions in the chat.
Well, aspirational would be doing these things and getting compensated for them. Okay, that not just taking them on without being recognized and supported financially and fiscally and in every other way. So that is part of what causes some of the tension. That you're doing it, you're taking it on, and you're not recognized in a way in budgets and in federal funding and in all types of ways as taking it on. So I have to.
I think that's great. And I'll just say, one more thing. I wrote an op-ed about this in the Times right before the election in this past year when it looked like the post office was being sabotaged. And I wrote that I thought we need to think more creatively about how to plug libraries into the formal mechanisms of the democratic system across cities and states. Some places do this tremendously well, but there's no reason why the contemporary library should not be a place where you register to vote. There's no reason why it's a place where you do early voting.
Yes.
Ballot boxes should be the norm. We use the library for the census. We already use the library as a place to process issues. And I'll tell you, like in my work around Palaces for the People, I spent a lot of time in libraries in red states where I can tell you that conservative communities value the role the libraries play in helping them to vote and to process issues and to have discussions. It's really, when you drill down, one of the few institutions that Americans across the board trust and admire, where they feel welcome and dignified. And I think we need institutions like that to step up to deal with it, what is genuinely a crisis for democracy at this moment.
And libraries and librarians have stepped up. They just also need other people to be with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've been stepping up, but that's why it's so important to have this conversation, as I started out with, and have Shannon and Eric and so many other people saying you're important too. We preach to the choir, and I know choirs need to, rehearse, but it's nice when you have comrades.
I think we're starting to see it more. I mean, before we all started focusing on the pandemic all the time, I did have the sense that the library was having a moment. And, we're starting to see the invisible and often unappreciated work that librarians do in so many communities. And, I think it is, the love can be a little too much, I know, sometimes, but it's important for us to recognize that work. And it's about time, we appreciate, I think, this extraordinary and unusual system that we built in this country, the kind of community and neighborhood and branch libraries we have and the services they provide, the work they do. That is not something to take for granted. And before we close, I want to say, if the library did not exist today and
Invented
governor and tried to pitch it as a project, they would laugh out of the State House, even if you were in the Republic of Berkeley, and there's no way that the library exists.
Tacoma Park out here.
Exactly, there's no way that the library exists in the world today, given our values and our way of governing things. And I think we should try to understand who were we once that we built these libraries, and what do we need to do to rekindle that kind of civic sentiment.
1870s with universal education. That's when the whole thing with libraries really became part of that, and communities and things like that. The country was recouping in some instances, and also building.
I am going to interject for closing remarks and thank the three of you for a phenomenal conversation. Shannon, that last comment too, that we're lucky to have you, we're lucky to have Dr. Hayden,
Yes.
certainly lucky
Shannon.
to have you, Eric, kind of leading these ideas and the charge to, as you said, Eric, take the moment and maybe make it a movement. Clearly that's been happening within the library system, and Open House New York's commitment to really connect the vital aspects of our built environment with this whole civic identity and individual and community opportunity. Thank you. This has been a great talk. I have to do this plug because it just, Scott Lauer, our founder, is on the call, the founder of Open House New York, and he's getting ready to move to Philly to lead some really important work about investing, how we're going to take some public dollars and invest in Philly's library system among other social infrastructure and civic infrastructure. So if you can see where this work is at the heart of what Open House New York is about. Thank you everyone who's joined. We do have a link, I believe, in the chat for becoming a member. Again, stay tuned for future events in this series, and to be continued. We really feel very, very fortunate to have everyone with us today.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for including me.
Dr. Hayden.
Thanks.
There's that member link.
Good.
Become an Open House New Yorker.
I might have to.
Absolutely. Well, look, the chat, we're going to put the chat online too.
Oh, could you?
I should have said that. Excuse me. We will put the video recording online tomorrow. We'll send it around to all the participants, and this chat, so much content, so much great ideas, and such a willing and committed, engaged audience for this. I haven't seen this before, but it's all my first
playlist for the songs in the intro.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Yes.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
They help.
Give your little one, she's not that little, give her my best.
Thank you so much. I will for sure.
Okay,
Good night.
okay, bye-bye.